Your faculty also award two important prizes to journalism out in the world, and the first of them is the Mike Berger Award, which will be presented by Professor Meg Kissinger.
Thank you. So Mike Berger was a New York Times reporter who distinguished himself with a story about a shooting. Word came to the newsroom at the New York Times in September of 1949 that there had been a shooting in Camden, New Jersey. And Berger got on a train and went to Camden, and over the course of the next 10 hours, interviewed no fewer than 20 people. And you who have just finished your master's projects will be intrigued to learn that he filed 4,000 words, and he turned in his copy an hour before deadline. So it is right and fitting to be presenting this award to John Woodrow Cox from the Washington Post for his beautiful stories about the same topic. Long before the marches and school walkouts, John Woodrow Cox of the Washington Post knew the terrible toll of gun violence to children in America. He traveled across the country last year to take inventory of the carnage. Cox's reporting took him to funeral homes, classrooms, hospital wards, and of course, playgrounds. His compelling portraits of gunshots' youngest victims brought the judges to tears. The little girl in South Carolina who's so traumatized by the shooting death of her first grade buddy that she tore her eyelashes out. The 4-year-old in Cleveland caught in the crossfire of gang warfare who was shot in the head as he sat in his car seat. Doctors put his skull back together with titanium plates. The high school twins who frantically searched for one another in the slog of blood and bullets at a country music festival in Las Vegas. The mother who asked mourners to wear Ninja Turtle and Batman costumes to her 6-year-old's funeral because the boy loved superheroes. By Cox's accounting, more than 200,000 children have been directly affected by school shootings since the Columbine attacks in 1999, and the numbers continue to grow. Cox drew these stories with an artist's eye for detail, a sociologist's firm grasp of data, and a poet's gift for stirring the soul. For outstanding human interest reporting across platforms, Columbia University is honored to confer the Mike Berger Award to John Woodrow Cox.
Thank you, Meg, so much for those kind words, and thank you to Columbia and to the judges for honoring this body of work, and congratulations to the other great journalists being honored here today. And most of all, congratulations to those of you who are going to graduate this week. That is a tremendous accomplishment. Early last year, as I set off to begin the reporting on these stories, there were moments when I wondered truly whether anyone would read them. Whether they would have any real chance to make a difference. And that was in part because the nation and newsrooms were and are extraordinarily focused on politics and on the White House and, frankly, the fight to preserve our democracy. You may notice, for example, that your keynote speaker has a few more Twitter followers than I do. But I wondered for lots of other reasons, too. Every week, hundreds of stories are written about the impact of gun violence on America's children. And this has been a crisis in our country for decades, and it's one that we've, by and large, chosen to ignore. So how could these stories make a difference, I wondered, and how could they feel fresh and important and urgent? If there's a single idea that has guided my approach to journalism, and that I hope might also help a few of you one day soon, it is this: go narrow and go deep. How do you convey to a reader the profound impact of anything on millions of people? The answer in my mind is always the same. Whether it's a survivor of sexual harassment, of racism, of genocide, or of gun violence, you start with just one person. For me, that person was a boy named Tyshawn, who was 8 years old, living in Southeast DC. At a distance, his story felt deeply familiar and arguably easy to ignore. It was a black kid growing up in a violent, impoverished neighborhood who had lost his father in a shooting. So how today, in this moment, do you make people care about Tyshawn and all the children that he represents? I won't lie, it's hard to do that, but it's not complicated. First, you show up. For me, that meant standing in the cold at a vigil for 2 hours on a Saturday night until I got the chance to talk to Tyshawn's mom and tell her how sorry I was for her loss and ask if I could tell her son's story. It meant hanging out with Tyshawn for hours, waiting for moments like the one in his room when he looked up and said, "Whoever invented guns needs to stop." It meant sitting next to him at his father's funeral and watching him approach the casket and place a handkerchief inside the casket. As he told me later, he did that so his father wouldn't forget him. It meant sitting in his classroom at school 3 days later and seeing him draw a picture of his dad before furiously scratching it out because he thought it looked ugly. To do all of that, to tell stories that way, you don't have to be the best journalist in the world or the nation or even your own newsroom, because I am certainly not. What you have to do is show up, be human first, then stay and listen and stay and listen. What I learned over this past year is that people will always care, even in America, even in 2018, about stories that are rich in deep detail and in empathy. Stories that go narrow and go deep, because those are the stories that make people stop and think and feel. Thank you.